Hello everyone, welcome to a video that I am doing extremely off the cuff, and I'm hoping I'm just going to slip into a good mode where I can talk about this subject, because I don't have any notes, so it's certainly not scripted, but I kind of wanted to try something that was more in the vein of, I guess, actually generic commentary, to be fair, and I hope you enjoy my fantastic Doom gameplay in the background. Of course, there will be other things on the screen. I will sort of be using sort of stuff from the web, like Steam page kind of things, like articles, like the Season 5 preview, mainly, it's a big one, among other things. Although I am actually using this gameplay, what I recorded, as like a timer basically, to make sure I don't go on for too long. But I thought it was... I was about to say I thought it was appropriate, but there's no real immediacy to this, or really contemporary relevancy to the idea of what the hell is happening with Rock Galactic specifically. Of course, unless you've been living in a cave, you know what's happening. Rogue is happening. It's a new game. It's a roguelite, although I personally think it might end up being more than just a roguelite, like genuinely. I'm not saying it's going to completely supersede Deep Rock, but I think it will take the mantle in a way that Ghost Ship aren't expecting, because they still expect to be going back to Deep Rock at some point, but sort of to interchange development. This is the thing that's really not clear, and is one of the big subjects of the video, because the subject is, of course, what's going on with Deep Rock, what's the future of Deep Rock, what does it look like after Rogue Core comes out, because all we really know about Deep Rock at the moment, as far as development of new content, is all we know, and I want to actually find the roadmap that pertains to this, but all we know is that content is going to be planned. What they're going to do with Deep Rock is going to be planned after Rogue Core hits early access, and Rogue Core is of course meant to hit early access in November. Is kind of the idea. I'm trying to find the relevant roadmap now, although I'm not actually sure, not 100% sure where it is. So I'm actually gonna, which is weird. I thought this shouldn't be difficult to find, but it might actually be here. Either way, we have an idea of Rogue Core's like outline as far as how they want to play things. Right, they want it to come out in the fourth quarter of this year. In early access. What is that symbol? Sports head... No, leave me alone. I don't know, sports headline. The idea is for Rogue Core to hit early access this year. That means it will release in the same way that Deep Rock first released back in February of 2018. So it will release as a paid game. It will probably be the full price. That's not 100% confirmed. I'm only saying that because if my memory serves me well, which it doesn't always, Deep Rock didn't have a price hike. However, Deep Rock Survivor did have a price hike. It did go up when it hit 1.0, but I don't remember that happening for Deep Rock. I think Deep Rock has always been £25 or £24.99 sterling. I don't know what that is in dollars, sorry. I'm not a calculator. But, of course, like I said, the idea is for Rogue to launch in early access in the same way that Deep Rock did, but it's going to do so in the fourth quarter of this year. The general expectation, certainly for me, is that will mean November. November is kind of punctuated Rogue Core in a lot of ways, especially last year, because that is when we found out about the delay, was from a On the Horizon broadcast that Ghost Ship did about Rogue Core, about the future of Deep Rock and Rogue Core development. And that's when the delay was announced, like the full year delay. Although it wasn't actually technically clear that it was going to be a full year at the time. I think they just said, I think it actually was meant to be third quarter of this year. Either way, I don't think anyone's surprised that there was a delay, because you look at the game as it is right now, and as promising as it looks, it's still in the state of being built a lot of it being built on Deep Rock, and what that tells me, even though a lot of that stuff is going to stay the same, for the reason being that it did help them get the game out faster than it would have done, the fact that it's still hinging on the fact that Rogue Core looks the way it does only because it's able to rely on Deep Rock assets, tells me how, if the game had launched last year in November, it would not have been in a really suitable state to be launched. And that is a simple fact of delays, so I don't think that's surprising to anyone to hear that it would have been in a poor state, but it would have been. And I think it's one of those delays that I think is actually I'm very okay with, because I don't take delays as sort of one note. I don't think delays are always a good thing. I think some people sort of see it that way. There is always a positive to a delay. It does always mean the game is going to be better than it otherwise would have been, but it can also indicate a troubled production. I don't think that's what we're facing here. I just think it's worth saying that a delay, I don't think is inherently positive. At the same time, a troubled production does not inherently result in a poor product. I mean, look at Halo 2, right? That's the easiest example to point to. Absolute abject development hell, but it's a masterpiece. It's like, okay, so maybe things aren't all black and white. And obviously they're not. I think most people understand that things are not black and white, especially in game dev. Anyway, so we're talking about Deep Rock. And I guess the idea is to talk about Season 6. Because I think there's probably a lot of people who are wondering where Season 6 is, where more Deep Rock content is. We literally haven't had a patch in many months, I'm pretty sure. In fact, that's actually very easy information to procure. We can literally just go to the the Steam page for Deep Rock. I do believe the last patch was, well, it's not hard to find, it was on March 12th, so yeah, well over 2 months ago. About just over 2.5 months ago. And I think that is literally when they last completely stopped Deep Rock development 100%. As in, this is going to sound kind of crazy to some people, maybe. There won't be anything for Deep Rock until Rogue is out. There will not be any apart from holiday events, which are a slightly, in my opinion, slightly bitter way of upkeeping Deep Rock, because they aren't zero effort. They're not all entirely made in advance. My understanding of the holiday events is that all the hats are made in advance, but they do. It still takes about 2 days of work to prepare and launch the events in game. And there's a small chance that they package a patch with the events as they go along. We'll still have quite a few events before the end of the year, but apart from the events, there will be literally nothing until next year for Deep Rock, and even then we don't quite know what we're going to get. And that's why I wanted to find that specific roadmap, and I don't know why it's difficult to find. It really shouldn't be. I don't know if we have the current roadmap here. Also, I will actually end up talking about this post, I think, because it is technically the most recent thing. I might need to actually go to the Rogue Core version of the roadmap. Although who knows if that's really what we need to see. We do have this living roadmap. What this tells us about is preparing for early access, quarter 4. But yeah, that's not really what I was looking for. I was actually looking for a roadmap that came from the On Horizon broadcast, which, yeah, like I said, I don't see why that should be hard to find. So I don't know why the posts aren't loading now, so that's great. Anyway, so yeah, we are entering a blank slate sort of period for Deep Rock, and well, technically, in a way, we entered it when Season 5 came out. And that's why I want to talk about the notion of what's actually happening, right? Of what the next thing will be, whether or not that's Season 6 or something else. And I think I may have found the thing. Get the fucking Christmas shit out of the way. Okay, found it. This is what I wanted. Right. In fact, it's actually all here. So this is the current roadmap. I mean, it's accurate, actually. Mainly if we're looking at the Rogue Core and Deep Rock stuff. Oh, actually, no, I think this is actually no longer accurate. I think. Unless that was... Oh, no. I think that is accurate. It's the 1.0 launch. Although, actually, Update 5 might be in the endless mode. Not really relevant. Rogue Core closed out for playtest quarter 2. That's been hit. Rogue Core quarter 4 early access launch. Yet to be, but I think it's pretty fair to say it will happen. That's when it will happen. I don't think we're looking at any more Rogue Core delays. I mean, you can just look at Rogue Core at the moment and I think easily see there's no way they're going to need to delay it. It looks like a very playable game that they really just at the moment need to focus on refining it from a systematic standpoint. Make sure the systems are in place for a satisfying, sort of well-rounded experience. It can provide, maybe a couple hundred hours at most. Ideally more over the course of its entire lifespan. Something like that. So,
put a little bit of work into progression mainly, and then sort of after launch really flesh out like variety of weapons and whatnot and enemies and maps and all that kind of thing. But right now it looks extremely playable and fun, and they're like how quick they are with adding content is pretty impressive. We've already seen a second update to the update 2 for the alpha, adding a bunch of content in just about a month. That kind of gives you an idea of how fast Ghost Ship are when they kind of have a blank slate to work with. But we need to talk about this part here. So this is all in basically TBA. This is kind of a 2025 roadmap. Obviously, we have a 2025 section, but then we also have TBA, which is placed after quarter 4. So it's fair to say what TBA also represents is 2026 and beyond. I'm only saying beyond because that's more likely for Dark Swarm. Although I don't doubt Dark Swarm will come out next year. I'm just saying TBA doesn't inherently mean all in 2026. But it definitely means after 2025, given that it's placed after quarter 4. And even if it doesn't exactly mean that, because I think the plan is actually to launch 1.0 Survivor this year. Deep Rock Season 6 we know is not going to be this year, because the plan is to launch Rogue Core in the 4th quarter of the year. So I would say November earliest, because it's probably not going to be the first month of quarter 4. It's not going to be October. It's going to be November at the earliest. So obviously we're not getting a Deep Rock update this year, no shit, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about, given that it's supposed to be an active game, and I think that's a subject that is slightly sensitive. It's probably a bit sensitive for Ghost Ship as well, and I think they understand that the only real way to approach that is at face value, and that's why I do want to talk about that news post that they put out today, but because obviously that's not going to get its own video, and by today I mean day of recording, of course. But yeah, we need to talk about this specific bit. Season 6 to be determined after early access release of Rogue Core. Season 6 for Deep Rock Galactic. And what that means is, so we look at the average like cycle of a season, right? They take at least 5 months, right, to make. And that's lowballing, that's just looking at Season 2. And I think Season 2 was already backed up by them having put a lot of work into prototyping the entire 3rd generation of weapons, because of course the biggest bit of content in Season 2 was the new secondary weapons, but they were sort of prototyping. It was never the plan to put out both the primaries and secondaries in the same update, but they were still being made in tandem. You know, they started working on the new generation of weapons at the same time. They just staggered, very wisely, the release of those weapons. But lowballing, we're looking at 5 months, and of course there's a Christmas break. What that means is that at earliest, if we are looking at a Season 6, first of all, if we're looking at a season for Deep Rock as the next update, and they don't do any Rogue Core post-launch updates, right, until after Season 6, because I think they will, but if they don't do that, it's going to be May 2026 earliest, so that's still about 9 months from now. Sorry, 11 months. 11 months from now, at least, until Season 6. And what that also is, because obviously we're encroaching on a year since Season 5 now. So it's going to have been about 20... I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. It's going to be at least 22 months between Season 5 and the next update. At least 22. More likely 23, and more likely 24, I would say. I reckon the plan is going to end up being around Season 6, or whatever the next Deep Rock update is summer next year, right? So about this time next year, which is ridiculous. But that's to allow for at least 1 or 2 post-launch updates for Rogue Core, especially to put out a roadmap to let people know what the next few months of updates should look like for Rogue Core. But yeah, this Season 6, or whatever the next Deep Rock update is going to be encroaching upon 2 years since the previous, and that's objective as well. That's not speculation. That's just what we're looking at. And so what we need to turn to there, I don't really want to ruminate on the sort of nature of that gap, really, because I think that's best suited for another time. In fact, I think that is genuinely best suited for when there is no longer a gap, for when the decision about what they do next with Deep Rock is decided and made public. I think that's really the only time we should talk about how long it's been. I would rather just talk about what it could be, what Season 6 could be, and whether or not it's going to be a season at all. And I think I want to touch on that part immediately, whether or not it's going to be a season at all. Why am I saying that? Well, that is actually very founded in something that I can't really reference in the most direct way. If this was a properly edited video, I definitely could, so I do apologise, but I will very likely, I'll link Ghost Ship's YouTube channel, basically, is what I'll do, because it was one of the first, it was either the first or second Rogue Core live stream, where they were playing the game, right, publicly, that Mike being the lead game designer, by the way, of both Deep Rock Galactic and Rogue Core, he said that what's next for Deep Rock Galactic is not inherently a Season 6. And that's kind of all he said about it, but I still think it's worth tapping into what ideas that can drum up, because it's not crazy. I don't think there's anything surprising about the idea that what Deep Rock gets next is actually not another season, because you kind of look at how seasons have gone, and you've got to give them credit that they still overall had an increase, but Season 2 and Season 4 both represented dips. And I think there are a lot of reasons that even if we do get Season 6, that it will still be a follow-up to Season 5. And I'll explain those in a bit, but the point of that is, the reason why that might not be attractive is because Season 2 and Season 4 didn't outdo their previous seasons, right? Season 1 was a new peak for the game, Season 3 was a new peak, Season 5 was also, which by the way, is awesome. I'm so happy that Season 5 actually outdid Season 3. I think it was going to be very worrying for Deep Rock if it actually didn't, for a lot of reasons. First of all, it deserved it over Season 6, over Season 3. It deserved to bring the new peak player count, and it also deserved it. That's what I just said, isn't it? Basically, what it means is the last update for a while was a big one, at least, and not a whiff, right? It went, even if it's temporary leave, right? Deep Rock still went out with a bang. But like I was saying, Season 2 and Season 4 are the lower points in terms of player count and sales, right? And I don't think it's literally because they're even numbers. I do think it's because they are follow-up updates, which means in terms of public consciousness, they look relatively similar to the previous update. Season 6 could avoid that easily, even if it is a follow-up to Season 5. I don't think there's any reason for it to look similar to Season 5, especially after 2 years. But it still could end up being a follow-up, and the reason why I think it could be, the reason why I think Season 6 could follow on the tail, ride the coattails of Season 5, even if it's not Season 6, is because Season 5 does leave some stones unturned, I think. There are two major things there, arguably three, but the third one is more so something that doesn't have to be a part of the season. But the two big ones, the biggest one is overclocks, by the way. Obviously Season 5 brought us, Season 5 technically brought us the first new set of bespoke overclocks, and what I mean by that is, aside from adding new weapons, and aside from replacements, right? Because of course new weapons technically means new overclocks, right? Because obviously we had the first and second generation of weapons, so we had the minigun and the thunderhead by the time we first got overclocks added to the game, right? But of course we also had those generations of weapons before overclocks got added to the game, as in both of them. We had the minigun, the thunderhead, we had the EPC and the Sabata, all of them before overclocks, and then overclocks got added to them. And then we get the third generation of weapons, the sludge pump, the hurricane, the wave cooker, the coil gun, right? And they of course come bundled with overclocks because overclocks are now a staple of the game. And that's why those aren't bespoke, because they were just a part of adding new weapons by that point. And then of course you have some examples like manual guidance cutoff getting replaced by rocket barrage, double barrel getting like a complete rework, but these are not bespoke new overclocks either, are they? Season 5 was the first time genuinely brand new overclocks got added to the weapons after the introduction of the weapons in terms of the third generation, and just the introduction of overclocks all the way back in Endgame Part 2? I'm not sure the actual update date. I think it was Endgame Part 2, I think. Anyway, but what they did when they added new overclocks in Season 5, it was one per primary weapon. And I am okay with the one per weapon thing, except for the Warthog. Warthog should have gotten 2, objectively speaking, because the Stubby kind of got 2, by the way, which is weird, but one of those is a rework. But yeah, the Warthog should have gotten 2, like objectively speaking, because it's just a weirdly low number. But yeah, It was 1 overclock per primary weapon. And what that means is there are secondary weapons to add new overclocks to, right? The natural assumption is you do it for the secondaries. Season 1, Season 2, you get primary weapons in Season 1, we get secondary weapons in Season 2, right? We get primary weapon overclocks in Season 5, we get secondary weapon overclocks in Season 6. That's one of the things that makes Season 6 being a sequel to Season 5 feasible, right? The other thing, which is a bit more loose, is mission type to biome pipeline, because that's kind of what we got with the two big updates that followed the 1.0 launch, right? 1.0 launch, you had that, it was great. Then you get sort of the small pickup update that added can't remember everything it added, but it mainly added the core lock, which is pretty cool. And then you get these two big updates back to back. You get Roughnecks at Work and you get New Frontiers, right? The first one added 2 new mission types, the second one added 2 new biomes. In the case of seasons bring a lot more content, even mandatorily. So you think about the season pass and whatnot, or the performance pass. So you can understand why you only get 1 mission type, especially when it's deep scan, right? Deep scan is a fantastic mission type. Industrial sabotage arguably makes even more sense, even though it's a worse mission. It's a much more thorough mission. It's a lot of development went into that, but deep scan is fantastic. Biomes, I still think they could go in for 2. The point is, you kind of have this mirroring of updates with Roughnecks at Work and New Frontiers, and it indicates to me that the next seeing as Season 5 added a mission type, Season 6 should add a new biome. And this lines up with Rogue Core very well, because the obvious implication would be to add the core biome. That being said, I don't want that. There is also the idea for Rogue Core to add up to, or at least 3 different core biomes, which I think is really cool. So that would make that even, not necessarily harder, but it would basically mean if we add all 3 of those core biomes, we're just copying 3 biomes from Rogue Core. I think they would much rather make a bespoke biome, right? There's no objectives being carried over from Deep Rock to Rogue Core. Why should a biome carry over from Rogue Core to Deep Rock? Then again, all the biomes carried over from Deep Rock to Rogue Core, so maybe biomes are going to just be shared. We'll have to see, but I think there is the idea that if we do get a Season 6, a biome is a very likely core feature of that update. I don't think that's crazy to say, even in the slightest. And the third thing is actually, no surprise, it's perks. It's a perk overhaul, right? And the idea of that has been around for a very long time, and I do want to substantiate that with some kind of evidence, right? Because, you know, you've heard, if anyone watches us, if you've watched or listened to the podcast for I don't know, a couple times, you would have heard us talk about perks probably at least 3 times, because perks are a system of Deep Rock that has kind of been not forgotten, but untouched for an extremely long time without any real justification. And Ghostship knows this. So this is the development Q&A, which is you can find on the Rock Galactic wiki. It hasn't been updated in ages. The last stuff is actually only from January, which is why, you know, probably not going to see dev Q&A video in a while. But the point is, this thing is a really cool, basically a log of questions and answers from dev streams. So I'm just going to search perks, and yeah, so you kind of get something that's in the... It's weird that the request is more skills, but yeah, you see, they know the perk system is in need of a rework, but it's not gonna happen until Rogue Core is in early access. That's actually quite a promising way of wording it, by the way. I want to say it's like, oh, that's not going to happen until this point, but that's really just an obvious thing in the sense of, well, whether it happens or not, it's not going to be until Rogue Core's out, right? We get number 1 perk rebalance, hopefully in the future, no plans right now, high on the wish list. Something to do with extra perk points, high on the to-do list, not going to start planning Season 6, yep. Add more perk, if we wanted to revise the perk system. Perk to improve boss, okay, that's not really quite. Perk update / rework, possible yes, coming soon, no. So you kind of get the idea, it's something that they actually really want to do, but it's just a prioritization nightmare. And I'm about to put forward a pretty weird stance on perks, which is on the idea of a perk overhaul First of all, I think it is going to happen, and I think it will be very much so aided by Rogue Core, and Rogue Core really being a basically treasure trove of just making dozens, arguably even hundreds of perk ideas, right? Just in the form of upgrades, bio boosters, and all of these things. Even the meta upgrades kind of lean into, because a perk overhaul could be a way of introducing crit chance to Deep Rock. Like, I'm not even kidding. And that would be such an interesting thing to do with weapons. Like, imagine if you got a perk that gave you like a base 15% crit chance, right? And that played with whatever your weapons have as well. Meaning a weapon with a high crit multiplier like the M1000 gets a lot of benefit from you having that perk. That's not super likely to happen, because that's kind of just mirroring what Rogue Core is doing from a gameplay standpoint. I don't think they want to copy that. Like, I don't think they want to do stuff like that. But Rogue Core will absolutely be a launch platform for ideas for perks, and absolutely clue them into how they might want to go about doing a perk rework. But here's my weird take. It's that a perk rework actually it's more likely to happen in Season 6 than not. As in, I've kind of talked about the idea of the next Deep Rock update not being Season 6, but I think the perk rework is only guaranteed if we actually get Season 6. At the same time, I think there is another option, less guaranteed, as in not guaranteed, unlike, I think, perk rework, I think it's guaranteed if Season 6 happens. If we don't get Season 6, I think the perk rework will very likely happen as a singular update. I think there is the chance that Ghost Ship recognises Season 5 as kind of the swan song, but they do need an encore of sorts. But the encore should not try and match the heights of, and a Season 6 should try and match the heights of the swan song. It should be another swan song, and we'll talk about that idea in a minute as well, but I want to talk about the idea of the encore, or rather the infinite encore, right? The other option for Deep Rock, which is kind of renew it in a way. Really take the time, make the decision that you're going to give Deep Rock a more flourishing future. Obviously, it's already had a flourishing past. It had such a fantastic period of growth and excitement that was a really fun thing to be a part of, and Season 5 feels like a very apt cap to that, aside from the perk rework and secondary weapon overclocks, right? Those are things that should happen. But what if those things happened in individual, not small but not huge updates every maybe 3 to 4 months would be? So that would be literally the same as looking at 3 to 4 small to medium-sized updates per year. And I don't think these updates would necessarily be seasons. I don't think that's what I'm talking about. I think they probably would. There's the non-zero chance that if they do something like this, that they do add micro performance passes that get added onto with each update. But I think the idea, they kind of slipped into the zone of thinking the huge content packages are the only way forward with Deep Rock, and I think that actually had some truth to it when they were able to do that every 6 months, which basically never happened, by the way. Because obviously the gap between Season 1 and Season 2 was actually slightly less than 6 months. The gap between Season 2 and 3 was slightly more. And the gap between Season 3 and 4 was 7.5 months. And the gap between Season 4 and 5 was a year. So never really quite cracked it. I would say they did for, I guess, Season 1 up to Season 3. And it did work, these sort of larger content packages, every 6 months. But with Rogue Core in tow, even if their team gets bigger, which it is getting bigger, it's actually substantially bigger than it was even at the launch of Season 5. But even with that, they can't do that for Deep Rock. They cannot do even a Season 2 sized season every 6 months. As things stand, if they want to actually develop Rogue Core as their new game, as their primary focus, which they should, by the way. But what I do think is possible is that they have a B team. I think the idea of a B team is something they shouldn't be shying away from. I don't know if they are or not. We don't know what the discussions are. Well, actually, we do kind of know the discussions aren't happening. But a B team is something they should not be shying away from, because a B team to basically work on Deep Rock passively and then I don't know, every quarter of the year, the whole team suddenly very briefly switches gears to pump out a decent sized update for Deep Rock. Sounds to me personally, it does sound to me fairly sustainable, and therefore enriching for Deep Rock's future, because as it stands, it doesn't really have a future after Season 6, if that's what we're getting. Because, in my opinion, as well, because while I like the idea of this Encore, I like the idea of them actually be able to take the step towards regular updates, not maintenance updates, by the way, not maintenance updates, normal unseasoned updates that aren't maintenance updates. Again, I really like that idea. I think if they can find a way to do it sustainably, it would actually do a lot of wonders for Deep Rock that they probably wouldn't expect. At the same time, if they go down the route of Season 6 being the next update after Road Core comes out, next update for Deep Rock, it should be the end. Yeah. Whoa, a little cut, who cares? Yeah, so yeah, Season 6, actually, if it happens, it should be the end of Deep Rock, in my opinion. And that does entail me sort of outlining what I think that should look like, and that's something that we will do closer to the time. Once a Deep Rock update is something that bears discussing, that will happen in a more conversational format, probably a podcast. Once it comes back. But for now, if I'm claiming that Season 6 needs to be another, and in this case more of a true send-off for Deep Rock, I kind of need to outline what that would entail. And the first port of call for that is saying I think it should mirror Season 5 in a lot of ways. The first one, of course, being new secondary weapon overclocks, right? That's a big one. I think it should also, and that's kind of just its own contained thing, I personally think that's all they need to do as far as weapons go for Deep Rock from now on. If they suddenly get the spark to make a 4th generation of weapons, be not it in us to stifle their flair. If they want to do that, go ahead. It will be awesome. It would be great. And obviously a lot of them would probably come from Rogue Core weapons. That's perfectly fine. I think that would still excite a lot of people, because Deep Rock weapons are so deep and rich and fruitful for gameplay reasons. But at the same time, as far as capping off Deep Rock's weapon selection, I think you've only got to do those secondary weapon overclocks. I think that's all that really needs to be done. So that can sort of be a self-contained thing, and that really does represent the end point of weapons in Deep Rock. I think it should also mirror Season 5's dedication to adding a lot of cosmetics. I mean, it was a great part of Season 5 and gave it a lot of longevity. They neglected to do the thing of adding a longer performance pass, which I just think was wise, because they did the performance pass. It's on the stronger side. I think the framework is especially good. But they added a lot of cosmetics everywhere else. They literally added cosmetics to every single cosmetic pool in the game, which I thought was a wonderful thing to do, and I think should be matched by Season 6. And that kind of keeps that fairly simple, I suppose. I think the idea of a season event is somewhat nebulous at this point, but then again, what Season 5 proved is even though they're putting all of their cards on the table and making the best update they can, it's still going to have what a season entails, so a season event will be there, but that season event really should be a culmination of everything that they've learned from seasonal events. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I don't think it necessarily needs to be literally another core spawn thing, even if Season 6 is technically a follow-up to Season 5, but it's still going to be there. And I would maybe mention season challenges as well, because they did something cool in Season 5, which was adding double warnings as a season challenge. I thought that was really cool, but I'm not particularly concerned about season mechanics per se. Other things that the other mirror is of course the biome. I am kind of in the vein of maybe saying 2 biomes is more feasible. I'm not saying that a biome is inherently easier than a mission type, but I think a biome is easier than deep scan or industrial sabotage, I think. Especially because I think from an idea standpoint, biomes are so rich. I've got, personally myself, a lot of ideas. I really love the idea of the beehive biome, and the boneyard as well. The boneyard is one of my favourite ideas. But that's another way in which Season 6 should mirror Season 5. I think it should bring a new biome, at least one. There are, of course, a bunch of other things that Season 5 did. Season 5 added 2 new warnings and 2 new anomalies, 2 new secondary objectives as well. I think what Season 6 would need to do is not necessarily do the exact same things that Season 5 was doing, right? In terms of fleshing out like these aspects of the game. As in, it shouldn't be adding to the same ones, it should be adding to the other ones. What is that? That's machine events. I think Season 6 should bring 2 new machine events, actually. And also, in the vein of other things, there are other things that happen in missions that sort of like random events. Jetty boots, basically. I think they should also add a couple new power-ups. New things that could take the place of something like jetty boots. Don't know exactly what those look like, but I guess a really cool starting point would be rogue core class abilities, right? Imagine if you find a crate that gives you the Slicer's energy blade, or gives you the Falconer's drone, or mainly those two are probably the more suitable ones, something like that. Unless I'm blanking on another sort of key feature of, because I'm kind of thinking of something that goes in place of the mutators and the secondary objectives. So I'm thinking of machine events and power-ups. I don't necessarily want them to just do more mutators and secondary objectives. Certainly not more secondary objectives, unless there is one thing that I would love to see them do to really round off that aspect of Deep Rock, which is add all of the deep dive secondary objectives as normal mission secondary objectives. And that would require some work, because yes, you would for example, the where you get a dreadnought, a single dreadnought as a secondary objective would be blacklisted for elimination. Yes, of course. That's fine. But I think it should still be done. I think deep dives are not a special enough part of the game, and I'm not going to be suggesting that they use Season 6 as an excuse to flesh out deep dives either. I think deep dives are fine in the way they are. It's kind of a time capsule, a thing for really only people who are playing the game for the first time to focus on. I think they don't really have much standing for veterans. Maybe some they do, but not for me. So I think there is more than enough reasons to bring out the deep dive secondary objectives into the main game. And that would sort of be covering for a lot of like basic content additions that Season 5 sort of showed us they were capable of doing. Another thing would actually be mirroring the Omar and Hearthstone expansion, right? They made escort duty marginally better, a bit more than marginally. They made it quite a bit better by adding a new stage to the Omar and Hearthstone fight, and then randomizing the stages. And I'm not going to ask them to go back to escort duty again. It's still not perfect, but it's in an okay spot. What I would like them to go to is actually industrial sabotage, and I'm not going to suggest that they make another like variation of the mission length and complexity, not that, but I will say what they should do is add the idea that we've kind of been stewing on for a while, which is really upping the flexibility of how you actually play the mission. The caretaker fight is still a bit too much. I think a lot of people can agree with that, and I think what the idea I'm about to suggest could entail slightly buffing it, because the idea is basically that you could actually fight I think you should be able to fight the caretaker without taking out the power stations. It just means it'll be stronger. Basically, think of the caretaker's 3 segments, right? And yeah, I do actually think you need to buff it slightly to make this make sense. The thing is 3 sections. If you attack it straight away, you fight straight away, it has all 3 sections of health. But it loses a section for each power station that you take down. This would essentially add multiple variations to the mission just by changing the mechanics and not actually adding those variations, right? Just changing the way the mission works, and give players so much more freedom in a mission type that was clearly envisaged as a raid boss, but Ghost Ship did not have the stones to actually make a raid boss game mode. It was just another mission type. Or at least they ended up wanting it to be just another mission type, but weren't willing to make it less of a raid boss. So maybe make it all the way into a raid boss, or a boss fight that you can severely lessen the danger of by playing the rest of the mission, right? So basically creating 2 mission types almost. One of them is definitively a raid boss, the other is more of a build up to a moderate boss fight mission type. There's also stuff to do in the vein of Hazard 5+. what could be something that matches what Hazard 5 Plus brought to the game? So does Season 6 need to introduce a new system, or would it be more interesting to basically add new features to Hazard 5 Plus? I like that idea personally. Something I really want to see is elite enemy frequency as a feature for Hazard 5 Plus. I think that'd be awesome. The other idea is Hazard 1 Plus, and this wouldn't be actually locked to Hazard level, but the idea of an inverse thing, where you add bonuses that reduce your Hazard bonus. You add like positives, like more ammo, like player speed, like weird like sort of sandbox like God mode features. That could actually be really fun, but as it stands, I can't say I can think of a really suitable like replacement. So I think adding some more like options for Hazard 5 Plus could be cool. Possibly even expanding how far you can go with it, because I would know that I would love to push enemy frequency up by like 2 more levels. I'd be happy to do that. I think that'd be really cool. So you could do something like that. Also, enemies, no doubt Season 6 would bring new enemies. But more so, something that Season 6 needs to do to be a swan song is add the final boss, right? And I'm talking about a Glyphid Queen. Obvious answer to this is what it would actually be is something called a Glyphid Dreadnought Matriarch. That is the obvious answer, I think, here. This is the last boss fight that Ghost Ship would ever need to make for Deep Rock. The form it would take is slightly difficult for me to pass. I am not saying, even after the stuff I said about Industrial Sabotage, I'm not saying they need to make a actual raid boss game mode. I'm also not opposed to it. If in the deep dive terminal they add a thing that is a matricide, and this was actually my idea of what you would call Season 6, you would either call it matricide or regicide. Probably regicide. Matricide means just killing a mother. Regicide means killing like a figure of royalty, like kill the king or queen. I think it works for both, but patricide and matricide are a bit more gendered. Regicide is probably the better option, or royal rumble if you were so inclined. But literally seemed like another option on the deep dive terminal, like in the middle, which is like like a matricide, regicide extermination basically. And it's like this weird like raid boss thing. I would love that, but at the same time it could also be added simply as a new like dreadnought variant. It could be for a sort of one dreadnought version of elimination. I think that's also a way to play it. Or even make it something. No, I think that's probably the real be all and end all of how you would manage that. And yeah, that's kind of a general idea for Season 6. And of course, add on top of that, perk rework. That's the last thing, and I'm not going to try and suggest what that would actually entail. This is kind of what I think Season 6 should look like, and conversely, also what I would say really outlines the content that I would expect if they were to do a thing where they add content over the course of multiple smaller updates, right? Smaller but substantial updates. This is what I kind of expect. Like one of those things per update would be kind of like what would make sense to me, and you kind of get that content over the course of maybe it would take about a year and a half to get all of that in the game, because they do really need to consider how they're going to balance like seemingly working on Deep Rock, continuing even after whatever the next update is, and still working on Road Core. And I did mention, whether or not conversations are happening. As far as we know, they're not talking about this. Now, I definitely think ideas exist. There's definitely a little sort of sketch pad where they've written down some ideas, but about what they're going to do with Deep Rock next. Of course, they've got a long list of stuff they would like to add. It's just general like features and ideas, but they're just not talking about any of it at the moment because their focus is on Road Core, and they're a company that's going to be going to the future seemingly trying to work on 2 games at the same time, but one of them is going to need their attention more, and that's Road Core, unfortunately. Deep Rock, the main reason they want to keep with it is because it makes money, and that's okay. Right, because you look at the last thing we really got in Deep Rock that's of substance. It's actually a DLC. It's the 7-year anniversary where they added the Skullcrusher DLC, and it's really cool. It's actually an awesome DLC. But Road Core, they're not really even thinking about what cosmetics look like in Road Core. And so as far as DLC goes, because I know that they don't want to do anything other than cosmetic DLC, Roll Call doesn't have an inherent foundation that they're thinking about for how they would add DLC. So Deep Rock is, for all intents and purposes, it is a moneymaker. But it also can't be a moneymaker if they don't do anything with it. They have to do something with it, and that's where I worry about how they're going to juggle that, because it will be a juggling act, and Roll Call will need more attention. And I don't think people are going to be happy that if, the year turns, we turn to 2026, and we don't get any Roll Call updates for 6 months because they're making Season 6. And that's why I think these discussions about what they're going to do, even if they don't share the plans, the discussions should still happen before Roll Call comes out. I understand that they don't like planning ahead, but you also need to you don't have to plan ahead, but you do have to think ahead to make sure you're not shooting yourself in the foot. Because you're not going to know if you're shooting yourself in the foot or not if you don't talk about the future at any point. I'm not saying the plans need to be made set in stone, but they do need to be talked about so they can establish whether or not they feel comfortable abandoning Roll Call for a brief period of time. And we don't know if that's what it looks like. We don't know, because I'm sure what they are doing is planning future content for Roll Call, but when are they going to do that if the idea is to turn the attention to Deep Rock at the start of next year? I don't know, and I think it's definitely a sensitive issue, and I definitely have a lot more ideas about what I would do or what they should do, but at the same time, it's also going to have to be basically placed against how much people want Roll Call to be their focus once Roll Call comes out. Is there a chance that Deep Rock gets truly put aside because Roll Call demands their attention more? Yeah, I think that's actually entirely possible. Is there a chance that Roll Call is not as successful as they want, and therefore it makes more sense to balance their development, possibly even skew back towards Deep Rock? I think that's also possible. I think the ideal scenario, in my opinion, is actually that they don't do Season 6, or at least don't do it straight away, because Roll Call will need consistent post-launch updates to be sort of set on the path to being a success in the way that Deep Rock was. We have an opportunity here for a lot of people, for Ghost Ship to have so many more people basically under their banner to experience what it's like when they have a new game. But it's going to be sort of offset by the fact that they still want to work on their old game, and therefore maybe Roll Call's pace of updates isn't as quick as it should be. At the same time, it's kind of meant to be about Deep Rock's future, and my overall stance is that you really just have to compartmentalize. Okay, this is what I'm going to bring up now. The post that they put out today, which is, like I've already said, it doesn't actually constitute news about what's happening in either of the two games. So, apart from, you have something. It's been quite on the Deep Rock front lately, because as you might know, our development team has been fully focused on Roll Call. There you go. It's fully focused. That's kind of all you're going to get. They're going to treat it at face value. They're not going to apologise because they're making Roll Call. They're not going to apologise for the fact they're not working on Deep Rock anymore, because Deep Rock is technically content complete. They left it off with a massive update. They're now working on a new game. They're not going to apologise. They're not going to grovel. They're not going to tell you that they feel bad they're not updating your favourite game anymore, because for all intents and purposes, Roll Call should end up being your favourite game now, right? But Deep Rock, it still exists, but at the same time, if I were to give you some advice, just compartmentalise it. Understand Deep Rock has enough content for new players to sink their teeth into, and to, earn their enjoyment and respect enough to buy DLCs and whatnot. It's got enough going for it, but it might not get any more. If you can compartmentalize that and see Roll Call as where you should be, sort of the basket in which you should be putting your eggs, you'll probably be a lot more comfortable with the future of these games, because Deep Rock and Roll Call should not be interchangeable. But at the same time, if Deep Rock is going to be truly on the back foot from now on, maybe with only one more update to go, like I said, not interchangeable, but definitely Rogue Core should actually supersede Deep Rock, because the gameplay will be similar enough, I think, and I think they will pour enough of the same sentiments that made Deep Rock a success into Rogue Core that it will be a worthy successor. I don't think Rogue Core is meant to be purely, I think it's a spin-off and successor at the same time. And that's why with Deep Rock, they either need to, in my opinion, they either need to make Season 6 the last true update for Deep Rock, do everything that they need to do, that they've wanted to do with Deep Rock, and make it the best game, like make it the actual perfect game that it almost is, but isn't quite, finally hit that nail on the head, or dedicate yourselves to more regular updates that actually set a more active and bright future for Deep Rock, rather than simply sending it off with a bang. Sending it off because those are the two positives. What you don't want to do is do a Season 6 that isn't a true ending for Deep Rock, but it's still going to be like another year before the next update again. I don't think anyone wants that. I think we either want it to be the end, or for it to be a more consistent future. At the same time, I cannot guess either way. I think with the way that they are, we are very likely to... My opinion, what the most likely outcome is that we get a Season 6 that is comparable to Season 5, and then things kind of continue to look a bit murky for Deep Rock from there on. But I just hope that it works out for Rogue Core, even though they plan on going back to Deep Rock, and I think that's where I'm going to have to leave it. Deep Rock's future is uncertain. Rogue Core's future is definitely more certain, but also in terms of how well it's going to be treated. But it's also not, because they're going to go work on Deep Rock again, and what does that mean for Rogue Core, and what does that mean for Deep Rock in the ultra long term? We don't know. But either way, while the future might be distant for Deep Rock, it is still there. There will be more and surprisingly substantial content in Deep Rock's future. And I think that's an entertaining thing. If you can compartmentalise that and keep it in the back of your head, you can be excited about Deep Rock. Just understand it's not going to be soon. That excitement's going to be paid off. And Rogue Core, it will be paid off rather soon. And Rogue Core is shaping up to be something really exciting. I just hope that Deep Rock isn't compromised because of it, and if it is, that it's treated as though it has been compromised and gets the send-off it needs, and that in turn Rogue Core isn't compromised by the fact that they still want to work on Deep Rock. I think what we need is for some genuine decisions to be made, and that's not their strong suit, is making really decisions of that carry finality with them. At the same time, deciding to work on a new game over Deep Rock, I think is the most finality-infused decision they've made. So I think they are capable of it. But Deep Rock is their baby, and I doubt they want to let it go. But at the same time, if it's time, maybe you should. Of course, who knows what happens? Maybe Season 6 comes out and somehow blows even Season 5's record out the water, and it's like, well, clearly we've got to stick with Deep Rock, and I would understand that, but basically, the future looks weird. But I hope I've outlined what could be an interesting way for Deep Rock to go, content-wise. Irregardless, it's not a real word. Regardless of how that impacts Rogue Core, I hope I've outlined some ideas that sound like either a good version of Season 6 as kind of like the finale, or a way that maybe Deep Rock could have more of a consistent content dropping nature, content frequency, I don't know, update frequency, and how that's not an impossibility for the game and could actually serve it quite well, even though it kind of stands against the principles that go into making seasons. All that being said, I hope this does well, because I could see myself making more stuff like this. I hope it was enjoyable. Trying to be really just pouring sort of my thoughts into the ether about these kind of things. At the same time, this kind of encompasses pretty much everything that I think about like Deep Rock at the moment, as far as Deep Rock Galactic specifically, not Rogue Core. I'd be more likely to make another video like this about Rogue Core. And of course, you're more likely to get a video like this than an actual discussion video with like me and Tyler, because those videos are on hold. The podcast is gone until Rocal comes out, and so are other videos. But of course, news isn't, Overclock showcases aren't, and what this is the capacity, evidence of the capacity to make other types of videos. So if you enjoy it, please let me know, and of course I'll be kind of letting know if it just happens to do well as well, and that might be good enough for me. But either way, I think that's going to be it for today. If you enjoyed, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you want to see more stuff if you do want to see more stuff like this, let me know. But in general, if you want to stay on top of everything we do Deep Rock and Roadcore, you can also click the bell. And this is definitely a time where I should say thank you to our one and only true member, Boxfox Scoot. And with that being said, I will see you on Tuesday for the next Overclock showcase, which will be hold on, I know what it is. It's for the Stubbies. Well-oiled machine. Look forward to that. Alright, see ya.